Okay, I'm going to start the session right now. So I'm going to pass first for Professor Kostya to make his introduction, then to Barbaros, and then after I'll start the questions.
Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to participate in this session. I'm Konstantin Novoselov. I'm a researcher at the National University of Singapore, and my work is mainly on 2D materials, on nanotechnology, on condensed matter physics, and recently we started a new direction of research mainly into functional intelligent materials.
Prof. Barbaros.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Barbaros Oezyilmaz. I am a professor at the physics department and the material science and engineering department at NUS. My research areas are also in 2D materials. The focus for me is right now to see how we can bridge between basic science and industrial use of graphene and potential graphene applications, and that is done in part also at the Center for Advanced 2D Materials, where I'm the deputy director. I'm also recently working more towards aligning some of the interests of the material science and engineering department with more entrepreneurial activities in Singapore.
Thank you, Prof. Barbaros. And just to complete, my name is Ricardo Oliveira. I am the co-founder and the CTO of 2D Materials Private Limited, a company in Singapore producing graphene for industrial applications, and I will be your moderator in this afternoon. So if I may start with our first set of questions, I would like to hear from Professor Kostya Novoselov about the creation of the graphene ecosystem in Singapore. Singapore is a country that was really the pioneer on this research area, investing solid funding from very long time. Professor Kostya, how was this experience starting this new field here in Singapore since the beginning?
First of all, I think it's really important to note that there are a number of centers who study graphene and 2D materials in the world, several in US, of course, UK, China, but Singapore was always quite a strong focus for 2D research. And there is a fantastic ecosystem and fantastic community of very strong people in Singapore working in this area in different aspects, from chemistry to photonics, from electronics to proper material science. And that's probably one of the specific feature of graphene, that it's a very simple material, but at the same time it has a number of unique properties, and it allows many different applications, and it allows to also research into very exciting effects in many different branches of science. Actually, one of the things which is quite strong in Singapore, and I hope that we will see Professor Barbaros' opinion on it, is the bio applications of graphene, where Singapore is also at the leading stages. So indeed, there were some early investments into graphene research done in Singapore. A number of strong players in the field were in Singapore from the very beginning. I was lucky to be part of this community, directly or indirectly, from the very beginning, and it indeed grew into one of the world's world's strongest research centers, but also what is probably even more important, it grew into one of the most important and one of the strongest innovation center. And if you think about it, there are maybe only a handful of we probably should even say a few successful stories like Singapore one in the world, where we see scientists working alongside engineers and developing their research ideas very quickly into the applications.
Thank you, Professor Novoselov. Professor Barbaros, I think this is nice to hear a story on how was this your invitation to come to Singapore? Was the reason behind that? Was the science that attracted you more, or the opportunity to translate this science into innovation and technology?
I mean, first of all, let me perhaps just add that I fully agree with Professor Novoselov on really intense activity from the very beginning in Singapore and the key differences with a focus on innovation. From a personal point of view, I joined NUS back in December 2007. I was just finishing up my postdoc at Columbia University. And essentially, I was asked to join particularly because at that point in time, there were very few research groups, one of Professor Novoselov and Professor Andre Geim in Manchester, the other at Columbia University. And so it was a huge opportunity to sort of go to a new place and try to introduce something as a young professor. And what attracted me to Singapore was this idea that, you know, if you do something new, that you can actually greatly contribute independent of rank. And there was a certain trust in young people, and this still exists. So we are really a strong magnet for talent, no matter how age group. And so that was really unique. And the resources Singapore from the beginning put into graphene research and innovation were back then really standing out, I think also on a global scale. So what attracted me was essentially the discussion was always what it would take to put Singapore on the map in this new emerging field would be provided, as long as you promise to deliver cutting edge research, and that was very attractive. But at the same time, what was really unique was this keen eye on, okay, we let you do your research, but we would like you to also look at the potential to work with companies, with research centers, institutions in Singapore to drive innovation. So there was immense support in terms of basic research and a really constructive nudge to work on innovation. So that's what I attracted to me. And to be honest, I visited Singapore back then. I was already back then impressed and in awe how much research capability Singapore already had. So I was at Columbia University. Back then, Columbia University had a really basic clean room facility. And when I visited in US, there were at least 3 clean room facilities where you had access. So that was unheard of at Columbia University. So it was really this impression that Singapore cares about basic research. Singapore will support as much as necessary, will support to be one of the key players and the great basic research environment.
Oh, thank you. I think this is pretty clear that Singapore, since the beginning of all this so-called graphene journey, was a very important player and has all this ecosystem here in Singapore has created amazing, groundbreaking research. But I was to Professor Novoselov, how easy is here in Singapore to translate this groundbreaking research into applications and more into a commercialization and enterprise after that?
Well, I think you are trying me to answer in 5 words the very complex question, which we're all still trying to answer, and our whole session is about this, right? So let me maybe just start tracing things, and we can discuss each of those in details during our conversation. So first of all, I should say that even though my research presence in Singapore is actually can be dated back to, I don't know, 2008, 2009, but I started to work actually right in Singapore and moved 100% only 2 years ago. So my experience is primarily around research. It's a bit less around innovation, and what I can see is that it has some peculiarities, but it also has a number of the common features which you can see everywhere in the world. And of course, what is good around about this innovation research in Singapore and in NUS in general is the innovation focus that potentially you can choose a career path and your research path which is more innovation focused rather than research focused. And it's I can tell you that not all the universities in the world would offer you this path. So many of them are only research focused. There are actually some of them are more innovation focused. So it's so this flexibility is really important, and I should say it is there, but I would say we probably need even more of this flexibility in the future. So, but then at the same time, what is important to note is that innovation really require several components to flourish, and one of those components is of course exciting research and exciting ideas which are generated within universities, and many universities got those. But then to develop those exciting ideas, you actually need something extra, and that something extra is the access to talents which are not only research talents, not only scientific talents, but also entrepreneurial talents. And it's I can see that among my colleagues in academia that sometimes scientists look a little bit down on entrepreneurs. So, and we sort of used to think about talents as the science talents, but believe me, I've seen it very often that entrepreneurial talents are real talents as well, and you really need to nurture those as well. So access to those talents is extremely important. Then another thing which we need to discuss as well is that deep tech is very seldomly grows on its own, and deep tech in material science cannot survive without the understanding of the supply chains, because most often deep tech is part of the supply chain, and having and all our efforts in material science cannot be considered independently of the technology as a whole. And our ability to build into the supply chain is extremely important. And then Singapore is quite strategically positioned, of course, in Southeast Asia with very good connections to the major manufacturers, China, Japan, Korea, many manufacturers in Singapore itself. But it can be a blessing, but it's a competition as well. And this supply chain creation is probably the key in the development of the deep tech. And I know that Barbaros got plethora of experience in this, and we would probably need to listen to Barbaros and to you, Ricardo, on the talents and on the supply chain stories.
Well, thank you, Prof. Novoselov. And I hand it to Barbaros. Prof. Barbaros, do you agree with Prof. Novoselov? And how is your experience in starting up companies compared Singapore to other ecosystems? Is the same?
I completely agree with Professor Novoselov. And he essentially captured all the essence of this answer already. But let me add a few more points there. So I would like to reiterate the basic research emphasis and funding with an eye on innovation, but really the focus is on basic research, is phenomenal in Singapore. So I think, especially per capita, the investment in advanced materials is unique. But that doesn't mean that you can actually go from there easily to capturing the value of the research you are funding. And there, Professor Novoselov already hit it on, really made it very clear that it is not just the research which needs to be excellent, and it's not just the scientists at the universities which you need. You need the entire ecosystem to develop the innovation and to bring it to market. And that ecosystem, in many ways, is a lot harder to get and a lot more costly to bring to Singapore than actually the scientist. So it's going to be really having to take into account this whole range of people you need in Singapore to translate the research discoveries into something of value for the economy, for the country. And really the entrepreneurial aspect is difficult and lacking at this point in time in Singapore. And so there are from my experience, there are other challenges. And one of the challenges is actually, you really have to look at this in competition to other regions and countries, because they have usually a much broader base from which to draw in terms of manufacturing industry, already startup companies who are fairly successful, SMEs in advanced materials, component makers. Like in Japan, there's a huge group of small and medium-sized companies which are enabling the bigger companies to become global players. So we don't really have that in Singapore. So that means we have to bring that to Singapore. And then we need to use them to build up this base. So we are looking at a huge challenge. So we have one piece of the puzzle, basic research, amazing support. The second piece of the puzzle, really at the very early stage. And that's going to be a big, big challenge and requires consistent, maybe over decades long support. It's there for the bigger companies, but it's sort of like just building up for spin-off startups, for the deep tech, for the disruptive technology which is being discovered at the universities. And I think that's where the challenge really is. How do you really address this? Because you really have to import all of these things to Singapore, so it's a very costly exercise for a spin-off. Yeah, from a personal experience, I think it's also the risk appetite of potential investors in Singapore. I mean, I look back, if I may continue a bit longer here, we can also go back to the initial question, but if I look back at some ideas related to spin transfer torque memory, which we developed as part of my PhD, I worked on that, and my PhD supervisor spun off then a company. I decided to go for academic glory and continue to the postdoc position. But the foundational IP came from my PhD, and it was essentially one IP. It was a theoretical simulation of how fast a magnet can switch based on this new mechanism called spin transfer torque. That was our one key IP. And that led to a spin-off company, which is now called Spin Memory, and it's valued at 100 million plus. And there was immense support from day one in the US. It was extremely risky. So to have this kind of support from an early stage spin-off, for an early spin-off, is very unlikely. You need to jump quite a few hurdles. You need to have a product, you need to have a demo before you even can talk to investors, and or you are going to lose the company before you even started in terms of equity. So that's the one experience I have in terms of how easy it is to do these things compared to, for example, in the US, where I used to work. And my own journey as an entrepreneur, I sort of slash founder, I just started my own new company, Graphene Scale, and I realized the companies I need to work with for the startup, sort of be partnering up with, they're all from abroad. They are the ones who will help to show that this technology has value for future industries. So you need to go out and get these companies to interact with you. You need to find the right people to talk to, but they are not in Singapore. So that adds, it can be done, but it has immense additional cost and time. And Professor Novoselov touched upon this. This is really competitive, right? Once the idea is out in publications, you need to run fast. And you can run fast if you have a lot of resources, you have deep pockets, network. So the network you don't have, you have to build. So you need really deep pockets to run fast and be able to compete with the big countries like China or the European Union, Japan, US. So for out of Singapore, this requires extra resources and extra effort.
I think this is a very, very unique experience. If I may share some of my journey here in Singapore, since the company that I manage today, that I co-founded with Professor Antonio Castro Neto, 2D Materials Private Limited. We are a startup from NUS, from the Center of Advanced 2D Materials that you both are part of. Our journey, we have suffered exactly what you both professors have mentioned, where when we were inside the university, inside the US, the funding was huge. We could do whatever we want, but the moment that we tried to transition from the university out, the support is getting smaller. The NUS enterprise plays a major role in that, on helping us to spin off and to graduate from the university. The enterprise Singapore also helped us to reach the stage of we are today. But the investment, the funding to go to the next level and become, let's say, industrial deep tech player, came everything from abroad. Investors from Brazil, investors from Japan, because the most of the venture capitalists in Singapore, they are risk averse. They want more certain, let's say, IT or even fintech type of investments. And the deep tech takes time, takes effort, as you both mentioned, takes people to bring these talents to Singapore. People use it to work in a deep tech startup. So this has been our day-to-day challenge here in Singapore. We have succeeded in a certain extent, but I think this is a very, let's say, hard environment to grow as a deep tech. So my next question goes in this direction. If it's Singapore has a good ecosystem for a deep tech startup. I don't know which one who want to take this one.
Well, I think we already mentioned that that things need to be improved here, and the basic reasons is that you get the best ecosystem is when you have a number of companies working in similar areas. So it means that you have a port of talents which can move from one company to another. So you always have surplus of talents whom you can hire, and you also have always got access to quick service on small scale, because rarely your company produces the final product, so you typically need to incorporate it into more complex products. So being close to a supply chain would be of course much more beneficial. So those are natural restrictions in Singapore, being a small country, so you can't afford to have everything. So, and that's the question: how can we come through this hurdle, and how can we support our deep tech startups in the conditions where we are? So, of course, one thing is that the government needs to be a little bit more proactive in such conditions, but also we need to be able to tap to international funding as well, and be part of international consortia and international venture funds.
Yeah,
Barbaros?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me congratulate 2DM and the co-founders of 2DM. I do find it remarkable that despite these challenges, you guys were able to really succeed in this. It's always a huge risk for any startup, and doing this the way you guys did with the challenges here in Singapore is impressive. I actually know only a few other companies who sort of like have succeeded in that. And I do agree with Professor Novoselov, right? It's not going to be perfect. Singapore has clearly a very strategic interest in pushing innovation in advanced materials and in deep tech, and the government is heavily funding many of these aspects. I think in the research area, the idea that you need to go extra when you do this out of Singapore has been understood, and the support again in terms of basic research is phenomenal. In terms of like government agencies helping to, de-risk technology of spin-offs and so on, I would say compared to the international standard, it is also really impressive. But there is this extra thing which is missing in Singapore, and that makes it so much more costly, and therefore I think there is still a need for more homework here.
Okay, thank you. I agree 100%. And since we are going to the end of this session, I just want to ask you a final question, both of you, and with your final remarks. I think this is many entrepreneurs watching this session. What do you recommend to them in terms of translating their ideas into innovation? What do you recommend that to be the main expertise they need to create to do that?
Yeah, I would say what we've got in university, not only in NUS, but also in other universities in Singapore, are a number of talented and very, very active people. Many of them would like to go into entrepreneurial careers or into startups careers, but also we have number of really great ideas here. However, what we probably need is the entrepreneurial talents, and mixing the two, the great ideas, the great technical capabilities, the great technical understanding of the problems with the understanding of the market and with the understanding of how you can develop those ideas, and the understanding of the manufacturing capabilities would be extremely important. So I think because we are in a challenging situation, so we are where we are. So there are pros and cons being in Singapore and developing the startups in Singapore. So in order to support it and to bridge those problems, we need to make those few extra steps. And probably the most important extra step would be not to be a passive investor, but actually to help those startups with connections, with links to industry, links to markets in the other countries in the area, links to supply chains, and business talents. So I think we need a little bit extra from entrepreneurs and investors in Singapore, rather than it is generally expected.
Prof. Barbaros?
Well, I mean, these are also new things for me. So in terms of like understanding from a startup point of view, the opportunities and the challenges. But what I think would help is, first of all, the incentives may have to change at the university a little bit, that there is more emphasis, for example, for tenure track people to actually take this serious. Right? So if they were to be acknowledged as driving innovation, working towards spin-offs, really developing good IP as part of their tenure track, that would go a long way. And if that is in place, I think one advice I would have for people who are just starting off is talk to industry early. Build a network. Create a relationship with key players in industry. Socialize with entrepreneurs. And indeed, we do need government agencies and entrepreneurs and investors really help to nurture that kind of talent. But also from the individual point of view, what I notice is usually in the academic world, you make a discovery and you write an IP, which is almost identical to the academic paper you would publish with it. But that's very weak IP. And the other thing is, we tend to not take questions of industry serious from a scientific point of view. But many of the bottlenecks industry is facing today are actually very fundamental questions, and they would be equally exciting both for your industry partner to work on, together with your industry partner, but also for yourself to sort of, as part of your academic career. It's not for everyone, but this interface between basic science, engineering, I think there are huge opportunities if you happen to interact more strongly with industry, where you start to see the big questions industry has from the basic research point of view. So you can really learn a lot by talking to industry, also with respect of designing your research program, which then in itself creates opportunities because you know exactly what this invention is for. You have the industry partner already from day one. You can write stronger patents, stronger papers, stronger proposals. That's the advice I would have for people who are just starting off.
And just to finalize in my own experience, what I would recommend for, especially from the researchers who wants to follow this amazing but very challenging path of entrepreneurship, is to start with a mentorship very early, with a mentor from industry, a business mentor. This would have helped me in the past very much, that to have the right mindset and learn the right skills of expertise that I would need later to grow the business. So I think the mentorship is kind of different than advisory, as in, we are used in academia. And the mentorship, I think this is can help the entrepreneur also to at least to understand the mindset of industry, and to have a better match. Prof. Barbaros, I think one important question is that how or which will be the actions that we and the government in Singapore should take to bridge this gap that we have between this the academia and the creation of successful deep tech startup.
I mean, this is such a big question, so I don't want to pretend that I have really straightforward answers to them. And I do think that many things are pointing to the right direction. So maybe I can briefly mention a few initiatives and changes and I have seen now over the last recent few years. I mean, one of the big shifts is that the research funding agencies do realize to put a more emphasis on research, which actually addresses specific questions from a scientific point of view industry is trying to get an answer to. Right? So what is it good for? Yes, great science. And there's a big emphasis now when you submit big research grants that this question is being addressed, and there are resources now to be able to work on this collaboration or on these issues. So one point in case is, for example, the Center for Advanced 2D Materials, where the center was asked to specifically develop a program which translates the research discoveries within the center into a platform so that you can actually engage companies and try to de-risk the technology and try to start to build prototypes. And that's done within the Office for Industry and Innovation, which I'm leading as Deputy Director for Translation. And so you see that it's going into the right direction. That there's an emphasis, there is funding available already from the funding agency to sort of help the academic community to start building that expertise, to network, to create connections, to really bring that idea much closer to industry so that they can start playing with it. And what I also noticed is that there's also more and more an understanding that just funding the basic discovery is not enough. You do need to also fund from an academic point of view already the engineering aspect. How do you make this material available in a reliable way so that companies can actually take it, cut it into shape, put it into their products? That is a huge gap. And there's more and more research funding available. And that's, for example, the case for CA2DM, where we actively work with key players. But this requires, of course, resources, and these resources are made available now more and more. At a university level, what I see is that there is more and more an emphasis to also teach our students the soft skills needed. So they are not only supposed to learn on how to do great research, but we are also giving them the opportunities to learn on problem solving, on soft skills, on team building, on also if they have the interest, do entrepreneurial studies. So there is a shift more and more to train the students also more holistically, so they are more prepared for this kind of activity. So I think it goes into the right direction. Really, the one big challenge is, as you also mentioned earlier, what happens if you go out of the university ecosystem, out of the basic research ecosystem, and there you almost hit a wall, because all of a sudden the funding schemes, the quantum of funding or support is almost reduced by an order of magnitude. And that's the time where you actually need to go one order of magnitude beyond the basic research. And that's hard to get in Singapore. So I think the basic funding agencies to help make spin-offs a success would have to rethink on not only matching essentially the funding quantum when you look at basic research investment, but actually going way beyond, because that's where you need to really import a lot of the talent. That's where you need to make up for the unique situation of Singapore, where we have amazing research ideas, but they are all public. So unless you can run very fast, these research ideas are picked up elsewhere and then developed into a product. So there, I think one needs to think almost like, okay, how do we fund startups more aggressively than even basic research? So that will be, I think, the challenge on how to do that in a fair and transparent way.
Yes, I would like to echo what Barbaros said, that we, in the absence of the supply chains of the big industrial players, so I think the government needs to step up into this territory and give support to our startups. And I completely agree with Barbaros that product development can be more costly than fundamental science. So it's an unfortunate situation, but that's how it is. So, and we do need support there as well. I mean, of course, I love science and I do science for my research. By no means I would like to see the science budget to be depleted in Singapore in favor of the startup support. So I think we need both to
absolutely
to develop. So it is not either or. We actually need extra support into engineering and into the startup developments.
Yeah, maybe if I could add to that, I think it's very, I think the main strategy in terms of rethinking this whole problem would be treat startups in terms of need of funding, in terms of success rate, similar, and risk similar to basic research. So what I mean by that is nobody would be particularly upset if a particular proposal, a scientific proposal, after being funded, gets a few results, but misses the main objective, right? We all strive for big breakthroughs in our scientific career. We write great proposals, we aim high, but there's a huge risk we take, because technically, who knows whether nature will allow you to make that discovery you hope to make. And the funding agencies for basic research are very comfortable taking that risk and giving you the really deep resources you need to pursue this over years, right? Most big grants are 5-year programs. And they are very comfortable, the funding agencies, to take on that risk and to bankroll that. And we need the same mentality also with respect to spin-off. But unfortunately, the moment you leave the academic world, failure is seen as a true failure, not just a step along the process of learning and being more ready for the next big break and opportunity. So I think we should accept that startups will fail. We should generously support them, and we should make it as simple as possible to support them. So one of the things I'm now struggling as a founder of Graphene Scale is I'm looking at the requirements of putting forward a proposal to receive government support for a spin-off. and the paperwork, the requirements of reporting. They are treating the spin-offs more like an established company, which has the deep pockets, the resources, the accountant, the CEO, and the startup and spin-off does not have really the resources to do that at that level, and it needs to run fast. It cannot wait for 6 months, 9 months to funding to come in, and then it has to go again for 6 months, in 6 months for another round. And it's really very, very risky because we are competing globally for these ideas. And so we need to take into account the challenges which are unique to Singapore. Yeah.
Thank you, Prof. Barbaros. Yeah, just they make another break so that they can edit the way they want. So, and I think now we're going to one more question. I think this one related to a specific experience that you both had in the spinning off companies. If you could share some of these experience, I think you'll be very, very helpful for the discussions. What do you think?
Yes, I think Barbaros need to share this.
Yes. Okay. Then I'll make the question. So, Prof. Barbaros, my next question goes in the direction of your entrepreneur activities beyond university, your startup companies. I think this would be good if you could share some of your personal experience and that. How have been this amazing journey, like a roller coaster?
I mean, so I have only recently spun out a company, Graphene Scale. I think in terms of direct entrepreneurial experience, it is a little bit limited, but maybe I can share with you a bit more something which leads to that, and that is IP development. So I think if as a founder of a company where the basic ideas go back to the research done in the lab, it is extremely important from the beginning to pay attention to IP development. And I think they're really working early on with companies, understanding what really the technical issues are, I mean, we were lucky, we had phenomenal support from NUS ILO in building a strong IP portfolio. As we made the discoveries, we were strategic in making sure that we focus on composition of matter in terms of IP rather than on processes. We were trying to make sure that we don't really end up being blocked by existing IP. And that allowed us to spin off, I think, a unique company which is looking at strategic areas where industry is ready to take on this type of platform technology. So Graphene Scale, this is my experience now as a founder, is looking at 3 areas. One is energy. So can we use advanced 2D materials to develop new energy solutions? And I think, again, here, the collaboration with companies is really crucial. And we have been already collaborating with some of the big players to address specific needs. And the other one is in graphene semiconductors. So the idea here is that we are very far away, in my view, still to really have as a central piece 2D materials. But there are so many other opportunities in the semiconductor industry where 2D materials can really play a key role in helping to overcome some of the existing bottlenecks. So one of the challenges are diffusion barriers for copper interconnects, which allows you to further scale down the entire chip. And there, I think 2D materials have a great opportunity to play a key role. And again, from my experience, really the key is to work with companies to bring them on board early on. But in order to do that, you do need to have a strong IP portfolio. Otherwise, these become friendly competitions, which quickly will turn sour. And in terms of other opportunities, I think one of the, coming from NUS, what I find really exciting is we have NUH just next door. Right? So that means this is a unique opportunity, which I don't think is that common, where you can work with medical colleagues in the medical area who are doing the actual patient care, people who are doing the research in medical sciences, and material scientists. We can really work very closely together, and there I think there is also going to be a lot of opportunities for 2D materials. One area we are looking at is transparent bandages, antibacterial bandages, which then later on can be developed into smart bandages.
This is really amazing. And I want to hear from the Professor Novoselov, combining every experience that you share, Prof. Barbaros. Professor Novoselov, how do you see here in Singapore the future of the material science and engineering in terms of translating this whole bunch of knowledge generated, and how can the country benefit from that? How do you see this bright future?
I think there is really a wealth of knowledge in our universities, accumulated around the area of materials, advanced materials, condensed matter physics, and so on. And you could see that this knowledge is being on demand, because we have some industrial labs around university which are which work in the area of advanced materials. So we do have demand from our industrial partners. So I won't call names just in case, but we know those examples, and those are leading companies from not only in Southeast Asia but around the world as well. And so it shows that indeed we do have some very good results which are on demand for the rest of the world. The question is, for Singapore, is really how to make sure that Singapore benefits from this rather than the rest of the world benefits from this. And it's a challenging question, because of course what we do is we sell our on-demand research, but that's of course peanuts. It's not any serious business. The serious business is when you take those ideas, you bring them into a startup, you nurture it, and then the startup is either developed into a large company or being bought by a large company. And for that we need quite a lot of efforts. It's much harder task to fulfill, but of course the benefits are much larger as well.
Yeah, I mean, if I may add to Professor Novoselov's comments, I fully agree with everything he said. I mean, it's really remarkable. Just yesterday, the recent Nature released its Nature Index in Material Science. And NUS is ranked globally #7. I don't remember where NTU is, but I'm sure it's also very high up there. I mean, for a country the size of Singapore to be ranked globally #7 in material science is unbelievable. And it didn't come out of nowhere. It really came because of the strong government support and huge commitment in terms of funding, patients, grooming the universities and the professors, and drawing top talent to Singapore. So I think, again, Professor Novoselov said already, one would need to, in order to make sure that this value is captured here in Singapore, really think hard on how at the same level one could fund also the entrepreneurial activity out of the universities.
So thank you guys for the time, the excellent talk, very enlightening, even for myself, and I think that the audience will like very much.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, thank you all. Thanks,
Thank
Ricardo.
you.